All right. Hi, everyone. This is Isabel.
Hey, all right. We almost should say that backwards. I don't know if anybody would realize that I'm Wind and you're Isabel, or if I said if I'm Isabel and you're Wind.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. That would be really confusing.
I mean, Wind, I guess, could be a male or female name,
Yeah.
but typically we don't think of Isabel as a guy's name.
No, I've never met any guy Isabel ever.
No, I've
No.
never really actually met anybody named Wind until me. Although, if you look on Facebook, everybody wants to call themselves Windwalker, male or female. So I have seen that a lot.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
I'm probably I'm probably the only one who's got the legal name Windwalker
Exactly. That's important to mention.
though.
The real one. You know how they have like all those celebrities page, but
uh,
there's only one official.
right, right. Are we going to get to? Geez, Isabel, are we going to get to the point where people are going to clone my name? I mean, it's already cloned anyway. So,
It's funny you say that because I was trying to find Jim Carrey because I have
uh,
a dream of having him on the podcast. And I'm like,
mhm,
and I had to Google how do you reach or contact Jim Carrey because there's
yeah.
so many pages with his name,
Mm.
it's unreal.
Well, you follow the official Instagram or Twitter and hope that if you send a message, he'll read it.
Exactly.
Otherwise, yeah.
Exactly. So I'm sending it out there. If there's anyone listening that knows Jim, let him know that we want him on this
Uh,
podcast.
Actually, I have a contact in my Facebook that potentially could make that occur
Ooh.
down the road.
Well, let's see if he reached out.
Yeah, it's a she.
Okay.
I won't mention because I don't know if she listens to these yet, but she would know who she is just
Yeah.
by hearing that. Um, but yeah, I have a feeling that there's been a thing ever since I was in film school in Los Angeles where I just feel like this person has a role in my life and I in hers, and I think that's going to come through at some point in a way that's mutually beneficial for the both of us, she and I. So
That's really
when
cool.
that moment occurs, I think she'll be pivotal.
That's cool. Hey, well, let's move on with today's synergy theme.
Hmm, the void.
Void.
Just before we came on, Isabel told me that she posted something on our synergy page. If you're following us on our Facebook page, that uh, I just now got to read that she didn't even know what this word is about. It might be the wind show, so that's even funnier.
It is. You share that word, and I didn't really pay attention to it because I try not to put too much
Mm,
like thoughts to it.
uh-huh.
But then just before we connected, I was like, "Hey, wait a minute! Like I have no clue what the void mean. What is it?" Like you hear that all the time, and then I'm like, "This is going to be interesting because I don't even know if I have any experience with it." There was an
Ah,
actual void in my head when I thought
ah,
about the word.
ah. Now, often when the people that I've trusted have done energy sessions for me and they read my energy,
Yeah.
like Allison, my twin flame, when she reads it, she's like, wow, like I get the void just by feeling your energy.
Oh, that's interesting.
And you're in my and Allison's mutual contact, Chris from the Heart Center. When
Yes.
he did my thing, but he knows the void. I don't know to what extent. I don't know what his experience is with it. When we communicate about it, we seem to have a mutual comprehension. I feel, and maybe it's my ego, but I think my heart tells me that I'm further in the void than he is because I don't think the void is his life purpose, whereas my life purpose really is the void, as we
Oh.
say.
Well,
And
there.
that's been actually validated since early on when I first connected with Allison in person, and we were in this kind of little group of people trying to do a mutual thing, like, and they were like, "You represent the void," and I'm like, "That's so funny you say that because I'm just now comprehending what that might mean to me." Uh, it's like even right now, just communicating about it, I feel it. Like I go into this kind of it's a void, like a vacuum where nothing exists, but I feel completely alive, but my whole body and mind kind of go into this bzzz kind of sound feeling.
Saying, and it's the vibration, sound vibration,
The vibration, I think that's a way to describe it. There's probably many ways.
so
Um, what do you
let's
feel? What do
well
you
let's
feel when you hear the
clarify
void?
one thing. So when you say the void, I think of a black hole.
Mm.
So
That's a
is
good way
that
to,
like the
yeah.
physical like aspect, I guess, of the void?
I think, I think, yes, I have experienced what channeling has told me, the black hole.
Okay.
But the black hole, okay, here's how I might explain it. When I first moved here to Asheville, North Carolina, just a few months ago, it was dead of winter. All the trees are deciduous, so they have no leaves on them. It's just dead, and there's tons and tons and tons of trees here in the Appalachians or the Appalachians, depending on where you are in the country. And uh, all the trees, and I was living in them in a little village, a little community, renting a room, and like right up, surrounded by all these trees. The only trees that had leaves on them are the local rhododendrons. Everything else had no leaves, and I would take hikes right out my back door, and it was like I would go up, and normally when I've seen pictures of landscape like this or movies, I always feel like it's depicted in a very ominous, eerie way. And so it always feels dead and eerie to me. And so I went for a hike in this just to, one, go for a hike because I had been sick for a long time and I needed some exercise, and also to understand what it was like to be in these trees that had zero leaves. It's a forest of dead trees, is what it felt like to me. When I got up quite a ways into the hike and nearly reached the peak of this particular mountaintop, hilltop, whatever that I was near. And I decided it was climb, climb, climb. So I needed to sit down and take a breather. And when I sat down, I felt like everything was so silent that it was alive. And I felt my whole system felt like what it does right now as I'm talking about the void. It felt so alive in a seeming dead zone, where normally I thought there'd be a feeling of maybe, uh, what's the right word? Claustrophobia. I thought maybe it'd be claustrophobic
Yeah.
to feel this, but what I felt was more alive. I felt the energy move. I could hear the energy move. I could taste it. I'm very synesthetic, so I experience energy on multiple sensory levels that we don't even talk about in the 5 human sensory levels. So I could feel it on all these levels, and my whole body felt like it could just levitate right there.
Wow.
And so the void I would describe really as nothingness and everythingness at the same time, where everything is possible, and yet it's maybe static or kinetic energy, just potential energy waiting to be used, fully alive.
I love that, and I'm so grateful that you utilize winter or like that as an example, like nature, because I know exactly what you mean, and I know exactly. I come from the land of winter. Like I'm from Canada, and it's winter like for, I want to say, 5 to 6 months of the year, sometimes
Yeah.
years. And
Yeah.
I
Quebec, right?
what?
Quebec, yeah?
No, I'm from New Brunswick.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I'm
Okay.
French Canadian outside of Quebec, which is
Okay.
hard to comprehend for a lot of people.
True. There's a void for you. It's where you think you have an answer, but there is no answer. It makes no sense, but it does.
And for me, I always loved winter because of exactly what you've described. I remember sitting in the woods in snow, and there's like this silence, but yet it's so rich of vibrancy and frequency and energy. Like it's just amazing. It's like almost like energy that is so bottled that it's ready to explode, but it's not exploding yet. I don't know how to explain it.
It's really weird, Isabel. Now, I don't know if listeners or if it's just on my end, but you just went into a void as you were describing all that. You went into a frozen tin can, and you might want to try and say it again in case it was more than just on my end, because maybe you disappeared to the listeners. And if you did, great, because I would say that was an experience of the void to receive that. But try it again and let's just see what happens.
Yeah. So I was saying that I remember sitting in the woods in the forest.
Okay.
And everything is so silent. And you're right. I went right there. Like I felt it. Like I went exactly there when you said, like I went into a void, which is funny. and
Mhm.
interesting. And it's like the energy is so vibrant, but
Mm.
yet it's all bottled like
Mhm.
together and ready to explode. Like I
Mhm.
don't know how
Mhm.
to explain it, but it's like that type of like it's an inner peace, but yet
Mhm.
it's so rich of vibration.
It's like you feel like your whole body is like ready to explode,
Yeah.
and yet you're peaceful at the same time. And when you think about it and try and process it, it makes so little sense that it can short circuit you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah,
I love
right.
I love winter. It's my season.
So you just described the void then. So you do, we all experience the void. I think by and large, people are afraid of the void, so we busy ourselves, busy ourselves, busy ourselves to avoid the void.
My goodness. I love how words mean so much. Like when you start thinking of it, like
Hmm.
avoid.
Right,
Oh my goodness.
exactly. No, that's great because when we just drawing attention to that, again, for the person who might be listening that likes to think these things through, we just gave another view into it just by even saying that.
Yeah.
So the void, I would earlier today, I was like, how would I describe it other than sensorily? And um, so the way I would describe it to somebody who understands, again, Hindu or Vedic deities is I would say it's the Shiva energy, the
Okay.
energy that's very inert,
Yeah.
that has no creative ability without its female counterpart, as they describe the Shakti energy,
Hmm.
that fiery creative force. So it's very alive. It's very mutable. Actually, it can transmute into anything. It can really be whatever. But it takes the collaborative force of fire, spark, put it in action.
There's so much going in my head while you're talking.
Okay.
So for me, Shiva is like um, frozen.
Uh huh.
So I saw this frozen piece of ice, you know, how you see like a
Mm.
snowflake type of.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And then I saw that emergent fire energy coming in, and then that solidified energy that is just ready to explode and vibrate just fall into water. So
Mm.
it's like it means so much to me while you're
Mm.
talking. It's just like I see all those images, and it
Mm.
just makes so much sense. I love how you describe the two stories and the connection of
Yeah.
those.
And again, like, now there may be listeners who think that they've got a different approach to Shiva. Now, they might say that that's the Vishnu energy, or that's the Brahma energy, or whatever. But the truth is, you go in India, any province, and they're all going to tell you a different story about the deities to begin with.
That's so
So, so I'm not really concerned about that. What I am concerned about is trying to make a parallel that's comprehensible. And I think you got the point, and probably other people are getting it, that the void is essentially inert energy, as you say, a frozen. Now, some people again with Shiva describe Shiva as the destroyer, but Shiva can't be the destroyer until that Shakti energy still merges. And first, you got to destroy everything that's in the way of creating something new. So it still takes an act of co-creation for
Mhm.
Shiva to be called into action. So that is the void. The void is that energy that you feel so alive in it. You're in a vacuum with it. You're like, oh my God, like it's almost paranoia inducing, I think, if you're not accustomed to that experience, which is why people try again to avoid the void, because we're like trying to stack all these things on top of what happens if I'm sitting still and I've got nothing to do. Well,
Yeah.
you go into that place. If you let yourself, you go into that place where you can finally just be one, and you can be calm,
I
and
love
you can just observe, and then wait for the Shakti spark to come through and say, now it's time to act,
Yeah.
over and over and over. It's a never-ending cycle. It's not just one shot and you're done. It's like it's eternal. It just keeps doing that, going into a void, waiting, getting a spark, creating, but first destroying what's in the way of that creation. And that is representative. Why this is all important is that it's representative of the universe, as we call the universe in maybe scientific terms, that all came from a big bang, as we seem to think.
Right.
It came from a void that was there and a creative spark that matched the void and produced what we call the stars, the solar system that we're in, the planets, our Earth, life on these planets, etc.
It makes so much sense to me, and I don't even know how to express it, but and I'm sure there's other listeners that felt or experienced the same thing as me, is every time like the word void or black hole or something that is non-existent come, my head hurt. Like it's like I can't even allow myself to think that way because I feel like I'm gonna go crazy. Like I feel like I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah, you're right.
It's kind of difficult for me to express that, but is it something you've experienced or?
Well, I have multiple times, and I tell people you don't get to where I am without going through that. You don't go through. You don't get from. You don't get from that fear of the void to becoming whatever, a shaman, a mystic, true enlightenment. You don't get these energy shifts without going through the void. Now, it's okay if you don't go through it. It's okay. Like I don't want to put it out that it's an achievement factor. You know, like you don't have to reach my level of enlightenment or awakening or anything like that. Mysticism, you don't have to. But if you're going to, you got to go through this, and you got to go through it multiple times until it no longer scares you. And you have to know how to navigate it and not turn around and run the other way. Now I've found myself so deep in it that I can't turn around, and then it gets so confusing, and you get spun around because your mind is like, I can't connect to anything. I can't connect to anything, and I've been taught to connect to something. And this ties into like illusion, our discussion on illusion. Like you're trying to connect to things in the illusion that's created, but you feel like your body doesn't actually exist. You feel like you don't have any breath. You feel like you don't have any mind. You feel like your heart isn't really a thing. You feel like you're in this cartoon land, almost like everything is just, you just feel and hear the frequencies through your mind, through the filters that are trying to process information one particular way, and they can't because you're in the void. You're like, and it just feels like everything is unreal. Now, Allison listens to all of our podcasts, and she'll be able to explain it because she just went through. Well, it's actually kind of perfect. Yeah, Allison's going to be on our next podcast.
I'm so excited.
So Allison just went through a month or so of this, and she's been now over the last few years. She's helped me through times where I started to go into it and feel freaked out, and then I got to the point where I was able to do it on my own, and now it just makes me laugh.
Yeah.
And so what happens is when we see mystics, real mystics, they're fucking laughing at everything because they've been through the void and they understand what it's like for the mind to feel like what you described, that it just scares you. Your whole body has such a strong aversive reaction to it.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's scared that I am or more. Well, I guess it's scared deep down, but it's also the fact that not knowing what others experience. Like, okay, this is not just me creating this weird situation, or
correct.
It's all. I guess it's always great to have people like you to kind of like, hey, I've experienced this. Like, have you experienced that? Like, and understand it. For me, it's always, and that's why it's so difficult for me to get into that thinking of the void, is that it's like it's almost like I know I can't comprehend it, but I'm still trying to comprehend it. And with my ego mind. So it's that whole piece of letting go. But when you related it to nature, I can actually say, yeah, I've experienced that. I didn't realize what it was. And actually I've experienced something quite similar, but through a different visual, I guess, in my head. Is I was actually with a counselor, and that was when I was going through my depression and having difficulty. And she was a very good, I don't know, and I don't want to say energy healer, but she used energy healing techniques.
Mm.
And I went through this meditation, and all of a sudden I saw myself standing in the void, like everything was
Mm.
completely dark. But yet I felt like connected to everything and everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
it was amazing. I hold on to the feeling as opposed to trying to comprehend where I was or trying to see with my physical eye. I just saw with my heart. I just felt
Mm-hmm.
so connected, so unified. And I actually did not want to come out. Like, she had to bring me out. I wanted to stay there forever. Oh, I just lost you into the
Yes.
void.
Right.
I keep on.
Yeah, it's funny. Of all of our podcasts thus far, this is the one that we keep having this little thing occur. That's funny.
I know it is. A little bit weird. We'll put the video on YouTube, like uncut, so that everyone can see what's going on.
Yeah. So then when you get to that's a good way to say it. So for people who are listening, like when you start to experience these things, go into the place where you feel comfortable with it instead of trying to fight it. Just be at one with it. Just like know that you're not going out of it by choice. You come out of it when you agree that you're okay. And because what happens is so like a lot of mystics or shamans will say, show me a person that you diagnose as schizophrenia and I'll show you a good mystic.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're accustomed to the void in schizophrenia. They're accustomed to living in it. So schizophrenics actually have a lot to teach us if we know how to listen to them. We also, if you go through it, have a lot to offer a person who's schizophrenic because you've been through the schizophrenia of going into and getting stuck in the void long enough to find your way back out of that funhouse because there's nothing exists there. Nothing exists. As you say, you feel really close to everything.
But yet there was
there's nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. But I felt so connected. It was so bizarre.
Yeah. Now I know that people who are listening to this or watching this may want to know, like, well, what's in it for me? Well, everything.
Yeah. What's in it?
Everything. That's the gift. It's like the piñata of everything. You crack that open and you get to the core.
Yeah.
But you only do it by calming down and going through it. And sometimes it'll, if you keep going into it, like it might take multiple times because you have to really like be comfortable and you have to bridge the gap. And you already said it, when you go into that heart space, and that's not the physical heart, not even the chakra heart, like the divine heart space of heaven, as we call it, the heaven on earth. When you go into that realm, then you feel comfortable and you feel safe.
Yeah.
And you start to make that connection between that aspect of your higher intelligence in the human form. And the more you bridge that gap, the more you become kind of a void master. You're in the realms of being able to traverse that void more and more.
That's interesting because I'm just starting to recall my experience, and what I recall is being on this like blissful state for like weeks. I was in a blissful state for so long after going into void. Is that a common experience?
Yes. And now let me ask you: Are you afraid of death? Then are you afraid of dying? That's what happens when you get through it. You realize you've already died. Your ego has already. Now it doesn't mean you afterwards that you don't then have egoic experiences.
Oh, yeah, egoic reaction towards that.
Right. However, but if you're not afraid of death anymore, you've been to the other side. When you've been through the void and reached that place of calm and serenity, and you're describing what people describe as the afterlife. Well, that's kind of the void. That the void and the afterlife really are. I mean, there's many, many other things to describe to add into that, but you're essentially describing that process. So you've already died.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And that's what Christ was trying to communicate. There is a kingdom outside of this earth where we all are royal. That's
it,
it.
it's amazing how it's connected to the illusion, because it's almost like that 4 step down the road after realizing there's the illusion, right?
Yes.
That duality aspect, but it's even deeper. It's like in that state, like I don't even know how to explain it, because it's a feeling like you're so connected to everything. There's no duality, there's no separation.
Yep, exactly. So then you get to make educated choices about your life, you know? Whereas until then, you're making what you think are educated choices, and it's fine too to be making the choices that you make without having gone through it, because I know plenty of people who haven't gone through any of this, but still operate purely from the heart. They have already for whatever reason, they've come equipped to not even having to deal with that.
Yeah.
You know, like they're okay. Like they're the ones that we in the spiritual community will be like, they're like, they're not awake, but they're they're the ones who have already gone through the journey and have taken on an incarnation to help the rest of us dweebs get through this shit. Meanwhile, we're calling them unawake or dumb or whatever, you know, or low vibe, but they're the fucking masters who've already
gone through.
It's a leapfrog effect. It's always like we're always
Cycle.
helping each other in different ways that are incomprehensible to the mind.
It's so true. It is incomprehensible, but when you think, so I just want to go back, because I'm sure there is listeners that are listening to this and are saying Win and Isabel are just insane. I have no clue what they're talking about.
Yeah.
That's okay. Well, just stick around.
Yeah, the guy's gonna get better.
There's no right. But I'm thinking, like, is there, and actually went through the void and I didn't even realize that's what I experienced. So can you like, do you think there's people that experience the void like on one moment, like one short little moment? And if so, what would that look like?
I don't know. I suppose everybody's got their own experience with it. Currently on the planet, we have 8 billion people. So there's 8 billion different possibilities.
Yeah.
I would answer that more in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna tells Arjuna on the battlefield when he's describing all these different things that he's you know, he says, I know. Well, Arjuna is like, how do you know everything? And Krishna is like, well, I know the nature of all things. It's not possible for me to know the experience of everybody.
Yeah.
There's too many people. And this was written whenever the Bhagavad Gita was translated and Krishna was alive. Who knows what the population of the world was at the time. Right. And they didn't have technology connecting them like we have these days. But, you know, like when he says everybody, who knows what he meant. But it's not possible for us to know the experience of other beings.
Right.
But we can know the nature of all things, which I do.
Yeah.
And after you go through the void, you start to understand the nature of all things. And so you don't really need to know other people's experiences at this point. Psychology becomes a thing of the past, because now you just know, even though I don't know what Isabella you personally experienced with the winter, but I can relate to what you're talking about. And I certainly can relate to almost anything that you throw at me, because I know the nature of all things.
Yeah, exactly.
And so to answer your question, it would be more along that lines, like,
right. Yeah.
I can only tell you that I personally feel that, again, with 8 billion people on the planet at this time, everybody has had or is having some, or is going to have some experience of the void. Okay. Because I believe that it's important for us to go into our evolution, which isn't just metaphysical. It's actually stepping into a fourth cortex in our brain. Because we have the lower cortex, which is the reptilian cortex. That's fight or flight, kind of basic fundamental human experience. The next cortex that we have in the brain is the mammalian, or the limbic. And that one makes us really like stay together and really be protective of each other, and maternal and nurturing, and it's still kind of protecting us from the bad and good out there, or protecting us from the bad.
Yeah.
Well, we have this neocortex on the brain, the third cortex, and that is the one that is taking us into the way of operating without fear, without the need to huddle together and protect each other.
Yeah.
And then I know I have two neuroscientist friends, one of them who was a professor at UC Berkeley as a neuroscientist, and she said we also have a fourth cortex, and we're still trying to figure out the third one and trying to step into that, and we've already got a fourth cortex, and I don't remember what she called it.
Okay.
But so it's not even metaphysical. Our brain is actually trying to adapt higher and higher to new intelligence that it carries. And so we're trying to shed these old stories and old ways of operating.
Yeah.
So going into the void, I would say probably, if I had to, from a mystic perspective, not knowing anything about science, but knowing that it all matches, I would probably say that going into the void is probably a very necessary way of going in the body that we currently have into the higher aspects of the brain.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, whether it's a blip and you go through it, or a large, like for me, it's been a years long process over and over and over until I really felt like, okay, I got all aspects of this.
Yeah.
It just depends on, I think it depends on our life purpose. Maybe that would answer your question more.
Yeah.
I think it depends on what we're here for.
Exactly. What we're here to experience. And like, I know for me, like, in order to get there, I was like in a very deep meditative state, like, and relaxed, and I was in a safe place, like I knew I wouldn't be bothered, like it was really, and I knew I had someone else also in the space that was there to guide me, like, so I was completely feeling so safe. So I'm trying to relate to what you explain, is like all the other aspect of my brain, the needs were covered, I guess.
Right. Yes.
In order to reach to that fourth, like, cortex or whatever you called it, but
yeah,
it was almost like, yeah, it was an extreme meditative state that I've never experienced since. And it felt, there was no time, like I went into that space, I wanted to stay there forever, and all of a sudden I have my counselor trying to bring me back because time is out.
Yeah, back into that time and space thing. Into the illusion you come.
Yeah, and then I came back, and it was like I was high on something. Like I was completely like trying to bring back my mind together and realize, oh, where am I? What's going on? Who am I? Like, who are you? Like, it was like so interesting experience. And that was probably the most extreme. But then if I go back to when I experienced a similar feeling in nature during winter, sitting in the snow, it's also like, I guess the needs are also covered. I feel safe. I know that I'm alone. Like there's no danger. Like I really am comfortable, and there's no time either, because usually if I'm in nature in the snow, I'm not like timing how long I have to be there. So I can go into that space quite easily actually with nature. And for me, it's just because nature is like my natural way to connect with my spiritual self. So with my divine self. So and I'm sure like some people, it might be while they're painting, because that's how they connect with their divine self. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm sure some people experienced it, depending on, you're right, what's their purpose on life.
Yeah. And I have met many people who talk about their transcendental experiences doing just that: art, going into nature, running marathons, whatever. And now I've run marathons, I've surfed, I've done a lot of things, snowboarded. And I've had very Zen-like experiences. But the things that I've experienced in my awakening life have made those all child's play.
Right, exactly.
But I'm not trying to diminish that these are transcendental experiences. What I will say, though, is when you're doing those things, you're tapping into that aspect of yourself that's hyper transcendental. But there's more, and to get into that more is kind of what you and I are talking about doing in this podcast journey to begin with, is that there's always more.
Yeah.
And the more always produces a more harmonious way of operating within the system that you contain.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And you're right. Like, what I've experienced at that time when I was completely in the void is nothing compared to everything else that I've experienced.
Right.
Like, I can't even compare it. Like, I was completely out, completely. Like, it's just, yeah.
Yeah. So I would tie this back into Tantra, and if some of our listeners will know and others may not know, but Tantra is my life. It is what I am. And Tantra being, as we call it on Earth, an ancient yogic practice that could involve sexual energy, whether it will, and again, just a minor portion of it is called sexual energy. A major portion of it is just energy, period. But it's all hyper blissful, and it's orgasmic beyond a physical orgasm.
Right.
And when you experience these things in a really tantric way, then when you transcend time and space and you're in the place that you've been describing, you've reached a level of tantric orgasm, essentially.
Yeah.
Where
like the void is connected to that, like that same similar experience.
And the goal with Tantra has been to get people, now, again, if I've described this before, there's two different schools of thought. Tantra itself historically would more lean on within yourself, repressing the physical orgasm in a way of activating that hyper orgasmic energy feeling. You could do it that way, or you could do it the other way, which is definitely more my way, but I've experienced the tantric way in the way that I'm describing it. The other way is Kaula, Kaula. And Kaula then takes that and starts to expand it through multiple people. So then you get into things like Osho would do, like orgiastic experiences and whatnot. But the way to do that, the proper way to do that, when I say proper way, the meaning to get people to those experiences together, where now you have multiple people adding that group energy into that, is to get people through an individual journey first to where they're considered purified enough to be able to enter a group format, because now they're not going to be just in there trying to have fun, flippant sex.
Right.
That could be part of it, but they're capable. The wiring has been, the neurotransmitters in their system, in their brain, have been adapted now to be able to let the energy channel flow through their system so that they can move the energy up the way it's supposed to, instead of staying strictly in the sacral chakra,
right?
Down in the gratification realms. Now you're moving it into the realms that you're talking about, that you've experienced, where you're in this bliss where you just don't even want to be on Earth, but you're connected to everything.
And I can see the connection. Like, I guess the way to do it, the medium, it depends. And if it's the sexual aspect, I can totally relate the feeling to it, of feeling so connected, and that euphoria, like you're just like ecstatic, like it's just so intense. Like I can definitely see that in that aspect of tantra. Yeah. Absolutely. Because when I was in that meditative state, just that feeling of being connected to everything and everyone is just euphoric in itself. It's just so good. Like, it's unreal.
Yeah, your whole body is completely responsive, as if you're almost one large sexual organ.
Right.
That's both male and female. It's very unified, and you experience all of this hyper orgasmic energy that doesn't require a physical ejaculation.
Right.
It's just, now you're floating in the void. You're floating in the void.
It's a void, but yeah, it's that synergy. It's like that
Mm-hmm.
connection to everything and everyone, and
That's right.
it all is experiencing the same thing.
That's right. And that's why we have energy drinks, and we have synthetic
Mm.
drugs, and we have coffee. Well, I mean, there's everything is natural. Everything is synthetic has come from something natural. But we're always trying to recreate these experiences in lower forms,
Yeah,
but calling them the ultimate. But they're not. They're not. The ultimate is to just purely experience it through energy
from inside.
with zero substance,
Yeah,
just pure energy, and reach that plateau.
right.
And to know it. And when you know it, you can start to really recalibrate everything in your life. You can ditch a lot of injuries, a lot of ailments, you know. And ultimately, you can actually ditch a majority of them. You know, maybe you won't grow a leg back if you've lost a leg, but you can make sure you don't have an imbalance in your system
Yeah,
because of the missing the leg. You
it
know,
doesn't limit you necessarily.
you have zero limitations anymore because your mind has now experienced the all.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I remember, and I hope Allison's okay with that. If not, we'll cut it. But
Eh,
I remember Allison sharing um, at one point in her life that she was bedridden, that she couldn't get out of bed, I
mhm,
believe.
mhm.
And that's when she experienced the most joyful moment of her life, right? So I remember
Yeah.
her sharing that, and that's exactly it. Like it's the physical world is such an illusion, and you only realize that once you have access or have the experience the void, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm. It's
Totally. And it's one thing to comprehend it and to talk about it. It's another thing to experience it. When you experience it, the way you communicate about it totally changes.
yeah. Well, I didn't even know I experienced it. That's the other
Yeah.
thing. Like when you like yeah, and I had completely forgot about that experience also.
Well, see, so there you go. It's not the wind show.
No.
Yeah. Just like on our last podcast, shadow word, and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to know what to talk about. Here you go again.
It's the ego self, right?
Exactly. The mind is a trickster. The mind is like a full-on jokester.
Yeah, totally. And I've learned that. I learned to laugh at myself. That's why I wrote that on Facebook. Like that's why I wrote the post is like, huh, this is kind of funny. Like I have no clue what we're gonna talk about.
Oh
Either
man,
I'm going to BS my way through it or
it's not something. What I will say is that, and I think this is important to know about, to communicate about all aspects of the awakening and enlightenment and whatever, is when you actually experience them, there's nothing to brag about anymore. There's nothing to go around telling people, I've done this, I've got that. Like that
right.
stops with the actual experience, because when you actually experience it, it actually sort of rectifies that aspect of your ego that needs validation,
Yeah,
um, because the validation comes from having experienced it so
exactly.
much that it's in your system, and your system is like, there's nothing to brag about. Like
Yeah.
this is just what it is, and let the other people who haven't experienced it yet toad around and try and figure it out. You know, it becomes more and more funny.
And it is funny because it's almost like you're leveling up and you need to share to the world that you've made it to the next stage, but there's no stage. It's not, well, I know
No,
sometimes like it does feel like it's staged, but then all of a sudden the universe laugh at you and throw the
ah,
biggest challenge that is like, you know what? You haven't learned anything, dude. Like,
exactly. Until you stop trying to do that, the universe will constantly throw at you a balance to it.
yeah, absolutely. And
And
it's,
I've in my experience lately, that isn't happening anymore. The only things that are coming now are all the things that match
yeah,
everything that I've ever wanted.
yeah,
And
exactly.
the only time that they aren't matching is when my mind is going, wait a minute here, wait. And then all of a sudden it starts to get a little weird. And then I have to like retract. And when I retract, I'm like, oh God, no, I'm calling in only the things that bring me more bliss on a tangible level, on a manifestation level that I'm aware of, like to match what I'm trying to create in the world. So everything that I'm bringing in only matches the love that I'm already at, even if my mind is going, wait a minute, that person's angry, or that person's judging, or, road rage here. It's like none of that actually is true. And I have to make sure that when I'm in those situations now, that I don't go back to an old way. But then what happens is I tell myself that, and I realize there's no going back, because all the doors behind me don't even exist anymore. They're not even closed. All the doors I went through are gone. So I can't even go backwards. So now I found myself even further into the void, which is kind of funny, because it's like my mind will still do things. It's like it's trying to hold on to something familiar that it's been accustomed to all these years, but there's nothing there. I'm in this void. I'm in this place where there is nothing tangible. There's only the steps that I'm building forward, and the people that are showing up to do that with me, and the situations that are showing up to do that with me. And that's the reason why I think it causes paranoia up until this point, is because when you get to this point, you have to be so solid in going only forward, seemingly forward, deeper into the void, deeper into creative self. You have to be so comfortable with it, because there's going to be nothing for you to turn around and hold on to anymore. If you're doing ballet, that bar is gone now. You have nothing to hold on to. You're literally doing your ballet practice out in the open floor with no bar to hold on to. And to be honest with you, no floor and no ceiling and no walls.
Everything is gone.
It's all gone. You're actually balancing on energy, on thin air.
Right.
And you have to be totally in love with that. That's why to get here, there's a lot of paranoia and a lot of, are you sure you don't want to turn back? Temptations. It'll come in the form of a lot of people in a lot of situations, like trying to yank you back. And you'll be like, but.
You'll catch yourself.
Yeah, you have to detach yourself more and more from those things and to keep going forward.
And it will continue being like that, because we're in the human experience. Like that's
correct.
What it's all about, right? Like
exactly. It will continue to be challenging because there's no destination. It's just a journey, and we still have the lower cortex systems operating in our brain.
Yeah.
So we're still always at this point in our evolution responding with having those things trying to have their way. At some point when we're completely in the higher brain, we'll be like aliens compared to what we are now. Right. That's why I laugh when people talk about aliens as if there's something different than us, because they're not.
Yeah.
They're an evolved aspect of ourselves looking back into this, pulling us forward towards them.
Exactly. I've always believed that too, that it's just evolved humans. Yeah.
But we're still human. We're still experiencing but that's the beauty. It is the beauty to really like pay attention to the steps as we go. It's like climbing Mount Everest and just really stopping every so often and going, okay, look at how many steps I've climbed. I'm a little bit out of breath. Look at the beauty of where I am right now. It's really like taking your time along the way before you reach the top of Everest. Right. And, it's like appreciating the journey,
Absolutely. And it's like you said earlier, like experiencing the void, or realizing, like me, that I've experienced the void.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to now understand that, well, there's no fear of death. Like there's no point to that. And now everything is about, not necessarily, I don't even want to say identifying, because that's like the ego mind, but it's allowing yourself to realize or be aware that, I'm going into that human experience again, and like observing basically your old ways or your go-to reactions and things like that, but then always knowing that you can experience the void basically with you have everything that you need to experience it, because it's part of you.
It's part of you. It's who you really are before the body.
Yeah, exactly. And that's probably where we go back after our experience on Earth.
Yeah. Yeah. Although I think people more and more people are starting to believe that we're taking our body with us this time.
Really?
So it'll be interesting how that plays out. But that's like going to be a future podcast down the road.
That's interesting. Yeah, we'll need to find a guest that talks about that. One of the believers.
I've already met a few, and I've already experienced it. But we'll have to see more and more now that we have that as a dialogue. That person will show up.
Yeah, exactly. I'm super excited because we're going to start with this podcast. So we're going to start having guests, and starting
Yes,
the next episode.
that's
We're going to
right.
have Allison.
Exactly. My twin flame,
Like,
Allison, is going to be our first guest on our next episode. And we told, and for listeners, like if you become our guest, or if you know anybody who you think should be our guest, the thing is that they will pick the word that we talk about, and they won't tell us until the moment arrives that we do the podcast.
no, that's exciting. I like that. I like not knowing. I think
I know.
better for my ego.
I know, because you keep thinking you have nothing to talk about, and you're like, oh my gosh. I think what's going to happen down the road, Isabel, is that you're going to be like, you're just going to have this big aha laughing moment where you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's just all going to hit you. All the things that you've already like experienced, boom. And you're just going to, that episode is going to be so freaking funny.
It's going to be me laughing the whole time, because you've experienced my laugh before. So
I have.
The intense.
Yeah. Yes. It's going to be fun.
I want to say one thing. I'm super excited about Allison coming on, because, so first of all, I don't know if listeners know that, but we've never physically met, Wynn and I, or Allison, or anyone.
Right.
So we've all met virtually.
Me and Allison are married, so we have met personally. But
yeah,
you're right. You and Allison, and me and you.
The third wheel. And but yeah, I feel like Allison is like my sister. Like I feel so connected to Allison. So I'm really excited to have her on the show and see how it goes. Yeah,
I'm excited too. It'll be really dynamic and beautiful.
Yeah, and she just released a book, which actually looks like the void on it a little bit, right?
It's true. I'm going to hold the book up for anybody watching. The Era of the True Creator.
Yeah.
That symbol she actually used when she made a headpiece for us getting married. So she made a headpiece. It was like a tiara. Yeah. And the part that surrounded her was all made of moonstones, little moonstones. And then she had this symbol made out of wire hanging below. And then I think she had this is blue, and I think she had some aquamarine mixed in there as well and then for the watchers, here's Allison, who's going to be on our next episode.
Yay! And maybe you guys should have a picture of. Do you have a picture of your wedding with that headpiece?
We do. It's in my Facebook and her Facebook somewhere.
Okay, we'll find it if you guys want to share it on.
Oh yeah, I'm sure we could do that. Yeah, that's true.
That's great. Well, anything else we should add about the void?
I mean, actually, we could just erase everything we just said.
Yeah, done.
And just go. Pure energy.
Oh my goodness, this is funny. Imagining the trailer for this podcast just be nothing.
I love the pictures you've been coming up with for all of them. They're so perfect. You're so good at this.
Oh, you like that? Good. I'm glad you like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like we have a trajectory. Jim Carrey, Joe Rogan, Russell Brand at some point will be on our podcast. And so we're pulling in guests to build towards that. That is going to happen.
I just reached out to GP Sears too. I think he's hilarious. I really want.
That's his name. Yeah. Excellent. We're definitely gonna have that guy on. JP Sears, man, like we're looking forward to it.
Yes, me too. He's so funny. All right.
All right.
Great. Thank you all listeners for tuning in.
Yeah. And once again, like keep in contact with us and let us know how we're doing and what you want to hear from us. And we have multiple platforms on social medias platforms for you to be able to reach out to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great. Well, see you next time with Allison as our guest.
Definitely. All right. And we don't even know what the word will be. That'll be interesting and fun.
It will be.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.